All right, thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're gonna be reacting to the insane German pirate you have never heard before or about. We have a pirate called the Pirata Cofresi. Met the family in New York, actually, Flushing. Great family, all Spaniard European lineage. Cofresi is very well known in the island, very heroic, I would say. We're gonna just simply jump in. Thank you so much for the support. This is a video recommended from one of my subscriber or members on my Discord. So make sure you're part of the Discord. Links in the description, folks, and make sure you like, subscribe, and share my content. Let's jump in. Let's see what's going on.
Looking like a snaggle-toothed Neanderthal, Nicholas or Klaus Sturtebeker was said to have lived at the turn of the 14th century, although exactly when he died is still a little uncertain. Sturtebeker led a notorious band of privateers known as the Victual Brothers, or Vitalianbruder in the original German. Originally hired to fight the Danish during a war between Denmark and Sweden, Sturtebeker and his band of Victual Brothers continued their piratical ways after the war, but little is known for certain about the group. The Victual Brothers and Klaus Sturtebeker stand tall as some of the most
Can we have a moment here to really appreciate what humans can achieve? Wow, that beautiful.
famous figures in Hamburg's history, with Sturtebeker himself being one of the most notorious pirates in medieval Europe. But what was the story of the man who could down 4 leaders in one gulp? And why do Germans still celebrate him to this day? Welcome to Walk the Plank. The man, the legend. In the late 19th century, workers unearthed a skull on the island of Grasbrook, part of modern-day Hafen City in Hamburg. Due to its location and some of the damage done to the skull, it's been identified as the earthly remains of Klaus Sturtebeker, pirate, buccaneer, and living legend. The stories about Sturtebeker mostly focus on his enormously successful career as a pirate on the seas, but it seems that he started to get a name for himself even on land. In 1380, the records claim that there was an incident where 2 men were thrown out of Weismar, northern Germany, for general drunken debauchery and misbehavior. One of these men was called Nicolaus Sturtebeker, and his entanglement in a violent fistfight laid the groundwork for his later exploits. Sturtebeker's surname may actually be more a descriptive nickname than anything else, as it can be translated from German to down the beaker full, perhaps referencing his apparent ability to drink a full 4-litre mug of beer in a single swallow. Things are quiet for the next 9 years, with no reference to Sturtebeker until he began his semi-legitimate career in the late 1300s as part of the marine defense of Mecklenburg, now northern Germany. Charged with defending exposed towns against Danish ships as part of the ongoing war between Sweden and Denmark, Sturtebeker was given a ship and a crew and let loose on the Baltic Sea, much to people's chagrin. In 1389, we get the first official mention of the Victual Brothers. A town council responded to a man called Revel, who had complained about the fact that they had sold ships to a group known as Die Vitalianbruder. This nickname indicates that they were well known around the Baltic in this period, both as mercenaries and marauders. Finance had funded an expedition to seek out and destroy the Vitalianesses, the Latinized version of the Vitalianbruder. Sturtebeker seems to have spent a few years working for the Mecklenburg royal family, harassing Danish ships for King Albrecht III of Sweden in an attempt to get Queen Margaret of Norway to give up her claim to the throne. These lofty political issues were far above Sturtebeker and the rest of the Victual Brothers.
That's beautiful. Wow, you saw that castle right there in the mountain? Wow.
Concerned with where their next meal was coming from than who was ruling the country, Sturtebeker and his crew must have jumped at the chance to get off the farm. Life in medieval Germany would have been harsh, with most people relying on agriculture for their livelihood. Career progression was an unknown concept for most Germans in the medieval period, and it seems that a life on the open ocean would have been a far more appealing prospect for many. And where does the nickname De Vitalianbruder come from? It appears that while working for the Mecklenburg family, Sturtebeker and his men were tasked with supplying the besieged city of Stockholm with supplies. Successfully navigating their way through treacherous waters and enemy ships, Sturtebeker and the crew were welcomed with open arms and dubbed the Victual Brothers for their efforts. It seems that they weren't always bringing sustenance to their friends though, as one Franciscan friar reported that Sturtebeker had disrupted the herring trade and blockaded the port of Scania, leading to an increase in the price of these salted fish.
Interesting. So we're here in 14th century.
When Queen Margaret and King Albrecht finally brokered a fragile peace in the late 1390s, Störteberger realised that he'd got a taste for life on the high seas and didn't want to give it up. Although trade in the Baltic Seas was dominated by a trade alliance known as the Hanseatic League, Störteberger knew that he could take advantage of it and other port towns. He set up base in Gotland and turned the main port town of Visby into a sort of pirate stronghold. He held out for several years, pilfering gold and goods from the trade routes between Hamburg and Rostock, until the island of Gotland was invaded and the pirates were driven out. They settled on the rugged coast of the North Sea in what is now modern-day Holland, but then called Frisia. Finding a common enemy in the English, the Victual brothers started targeting English ships, but not for long. After only a couple of years in Frisia, Störteberger's luck ran out as he crossed paths for the final time with the German fleet. A dead man walking.
Oh, what? Dead man walking.
The story goes that Störteberger's forces were finally pinned down by Simon of Utrecht in 1401. After years of terrorizing the seas around northern Germany. According to some sources, Störteberger was betrayed by a member of his crew who threw molten lead onto the chain that controlled the ship's rudder, meaning that the ship was left dead in the water and vulnerable to attack. After his capture, Störteberger and his crew were taken to Hamburg and tried for several counts of piracy. Not one to give up without a fight or a bribe, Störteberger is said to have offered a chain of gold long enough to encircle Hamburg in exchange for his freedom, but to no avail. Störteberger was in fact incredibly wealthy as a result of his successful career in piracy, but it didn't matter. He was sentenced to death along with his companions, doomed to being beheaded on Grasbrook Island, an island in the middle of the Elbe in Hamburg. Despite being sentenced to death, Störteberger wouldn't give up so easily. According to legend, the pirate asked the mayor of Hamburg to pardon as many of his brothers as he could walk past after he was beheaded. Clearly thinking that this was impossible, his request was granted and the executioner duly did his duty and beheaded Störteberger. Störteberger then got back up again, minus his head, and started to stumble along.
Those pirates were not playing. And those people back then, they were not playing. I mean, beheading people, just killing each other was normal.
A line of men waiting for their own execution. After Störteberger's headless corpse had ambled past 11 men, the executioner stuck his foot out and stripped Störteberger to the ground. Despite saying that they'd spare any of his men that his corpse could walk past, the Germans went back on their word and Störteberger's companions were sentenced to death, along with the rest. Their heads were then stuck on pikes outside the walls to warn other bandits of the harsh sentence that awaited. An entertaining footnote to Störteberger's execution story goes that the executioner finished decapitating the 70 prisoners and leaned on his axe. The city councillors asked if his arms were now tired, and he jokingly replied that he was fine and even had enough energy to carry on, even to behead the whole Senate. This didn't go down well with the Senate, and the executioner himself was sentenced to death for his own poor joke. Störteberger's spoils.
That's how they rocked back then, man.
Störteberger had become a bit of a Robin Hood character for Germany and has been revived.
I mean, that's how they did it back then, man. They were savages. Savages.
As a folk hero at various points over the last century, including at the turn of the century. Since 1959, about his exploits that have been shown at the Störteberger Festival, which is held each year at Rügen. And in 2007, 378,000 people went to the festival. His growing popularity in the 2000s was partly in response to Germany's economic crisis and the sense of injustice and inequality that people felt was creeping into society. In 2009, a film called 12 Paces Without a Head was made about his life and career, which neatly summed up the German sentiment towards their rugged hero. He butchered people, but also has a very, very big heart. Despite the fact that the
So basically, he was like a Robin Hood. A German Robin Hood, right?
Victual brothers were literal criminals, they are still remembered fondly. According to legend, Störteberger was generous to both the poor and his crew members alike. He shared the wealth equally among his band of privateers, giving rise to the epithet like dealers, as the band all benefited from their criminal exploits. It seems that there is no end to the things that pirates will do with their gold, and Störteberger was no exception. His ship was not the average pirate vessel. When it was found, the mast was said to be filled with precious metal. One contained a solid silver core, one was filled with copper, and the final filled with pure gold. His ill-gotten gold was reclaimed by the city of Hamburg and was said to have been used to create the tip of St. Catherine's Church in Hamburg. In 2010, Störteberger's remains once again hit the headlines as his skull was stolen from the Hamburg Museum. Although the skull has generally been accepted to be Störteberger's thanks to the fact that it was discovered to have had a spike driven through it, it's not been fully concluded that this skull did actually belong to the pirate. In 2008, the museum tried to confirm that this skull was Sturkeberger's by taking DNA samples from people who might be his
Oh, okay. So you guys have the real skull. Okay, let's go.
descendants, as well as DNA from the skull itself. The results were inconclusive, but the skull was still displayed in the Museum of Hamburg History, as well as a digital reconstruction of Sturkeberger's face taken from the skull itself. His skull wasn't away from home for long though, as it turned up less than a year later and is back on display with improved security. Was he real?
That's the real question. Was he real? That's the question we need to ask. 'Cause a lot of these stories might be, like children's tale, or you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't know if it's real or not. Might be a legend.
As with all his
Well, I think very good video, very good video. It just give you the perspective that a lot of culture we have very similarities when it comes down to these kind of tales. He could be like a Robin Hood, like a tale, or it could be like a real thing. We don't know. But let me know what you guys think. You Germans, you guys can tell me whether this was real or not, or you guys think he was real. I'll see you in the next one.